Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to install the SuperATV front disc brake conversion kit on your early 90s to mid 2000s Honda Utility ATV. If you have one of these machines, you probably already know they come with hydraulic drum brakes on the front. And those brake shoes, they do tend to last a long time, but they require maintenance and adjustment. And if any of those parts are worn out, you've probably already found out by now that it can get really expensive. So you're probably better off just converting to one of these disc brake kits anyway. It's going to save you some money. It's low maintenance and it's easy to replace the pads. And hey, you're going to get a lot better stopping power. There's a reason why pretty much every new machine comes with disc brakes. So with that being said, installation is straightforward and easy. Let's go ahead and get started. So right here we have everything that comes in the kit. So you have the caliper mounting brackets, the banjo bolts, your hardware, spacers, both rotors, calipers, and 2 wheel spacers right here at the end. To get this done, you're going to need some common hand tools. So for metric combos and sockets, we're ranging anywhere from 8mm all the way up to 22. You're going to want to have screwdrivers. We've got pliers, hammers. This can help you remove some studs from the wheel hub, but we're actually going to be using a vise instead. We're also going to be using an impact driver. Some of the bolts the screws can be hard to remove from your master cylinder, so that just prevents stripping. You're going to want to have some rags, safety glasses, rubber gloves. We are using a vacuum brake bleeder. This one's from Tusk, but you can just use a clear hose, and you're going to need a brake or a drain pan as well. Now, as far as chemicals go, we've got this torch up here with the chemicals, but we've got grease, some medium strength high temp thread lock. We've got the DOT4 brake fluid, the Tusk first line contact cleaner, and some penetrating oil. Now, if you need any of this stuff or the kit itself, you can find that stuff on our website. Just click the link in the description below. First thing you need to do is raise the front wheels off the ground. You can use a jack and jack stands or an ATV jack like this one. Then just make sure that's locked out. Then we'll remove both wheels in the front. Now for the brake drum, there's some adjusters inside of here that you're going to want to back off a few clicks to pull this off. So if you look in there, you're going to see just a little star wheel, and I'm going to use a screwdriver and pull the little tabs on that wheel towards the center of my axle right here. That's going to loosen it. And there's going to be 2 wheel cylinders on this. So you can go ahead and rotate this hole to the next one. And ours did not have it. Normally there's a red plug covering that up. Just pull that off. So again, rotate that towards the center of the axle. The next step is to remove this hub nut. Now you can do this with the wheel still on and the wheel on the ground. Now I'm assuming that if you're doing this job, your brakes aren't working very well. So the way we're going to show you how to do this is with the pry bar. We're going to use it in between the studs just like that to keep that drum from moving. And with that being said, if you have an impact, you can use that to remove the nut. But we're just going to use a breaker bar and our 22mm socket. And these should have a cotter pin holding them in place. Ours was missing for some reason, just so you guys know. And we'll remove the 2 bolts going in the drum. That's just an 8mm socket. And then these are usually stuck on there pretty good. So you're gonna have to use a dead blow hammer and kind of loosen things up here. So one thing you can do is start at the bottom and then go to the top, give it a smack. You can see this one is broken free, but if you're gentle, you can kind of tap back and forth to help get that freed up. So we'll go ahead and remove it. And then as I pulled that off, you can see the hub just came with our drum since we already removed that nut. So we'll go ahead and set this aside. We're going to reuse this, but we are going to remove the studs from it. At this point, I've turned the bars all the way to the left, And we need to disconnect the banjo bolt. So this brake line coming down to the back side of the backing plate. And I'm gonna pre-clean everything with a little contact cleaner. Don't want any dirt getting where it shouldn't be. And then to free up that brake line, you've got a clip. Just gonna pop that out with a screwdriver. And I've got a 12mm combo wrench. Break the banjo bolt free, and you can see we have this drain pan underneath to catch brake fluid. And if you don't already know, just be careful with the brake fluid. You don't want to get it on any painted surfaces, otherwise it could damage it. Now it's kind of hard to see, but just behind the brake line, I've got a little vent hose going to the backing plate. We're gonna pop that off with a screwdriver. So this line right here. And now for the backing plate, the shoes, wheel cylinders, all this stuff is gonna come with it. So you just gotta remove these 4 bolts using a 12mm socket. And the bright side of this, you're not gonna have to deal with any of the springs or anything like that ever again. So we'll remove that backing plate and the rocks that were jammed behind it. The next step is to remove the studs from the hub. To do that, I'm gonna use this vise and a socket that fits around the back side of the stud. You wanna make sure that clears. You can just use a hammer, or ideally you would be using a press, but we feel like a lot of people are gonna have the vise at home, so this is the route we're going, and we wanna give ourselves the best chance. So I'm gonna heat these up, gonna use the torch and a little bit of penetrating oil on there, and then we'll press them out one at a time. And again, we are not reusing these studs, so you don't have to be too gentle here. So it's just gonna pop out just like that, and we'll just repeat those steps. So from here, you just wanna let this cool off. We'll clean it up with our rag, and we'll start with assembly. Now, while that hub is cooling, you can go ahead and clean up some of your other parts. So you can see this looks pretty nasty right here. I'm gonna clean some of this grime away. Gonna try to prevent a lot of that from getting down in that seal. Then from here, I'm just gonna apply a little bit of grease to the seal, and it's kind of hard to get your finger down in there. So if your fingers are too big, you can use a little screwdriver and smear that around. Next, we're gonna install the caliper mounting bracket. We're gonna use these 4 tapered screws, and I'm applying medium strength, high temp thread lock to each one. Then we're just gonna use a 5mm Allen to tighten them down. As you install the brackets are the same. The other one's just gonna flip to the other side, but you want the mounting holes towards the back of the machine. Now for the disc and hub assembly, I just want to point out that these holes in the disc itself, I'm gonna have it so at the top of this, the holes are kind of facing towards the back of the machine. I don't know that it really matters, but with it in that orientation, I'm gonna start with these bigger bolts that came in the kit. I'm gonna go through the back side. Then you've got a spacer. And then you're gonna take your hub. It's gonna go through there. And you've got this wheel spacer. You're just gonna thread right into that. And before you do the final tightening, just make sure that you're centered up on that lip right there. Then from here, I'm gonna take some grease. I'm gonna apply it to these splines in here on the hub. Don't want this thing seizing up. There's also just a little rubber seal right there at the end. Make sure you have some on that. And then I'm just putting a light coating of grease on these stepped flanges. You don't want any excess out here that could fly on your disc. So now we can set the hub in place. You're gonna have to rotate this to line up with your axle. It's looking real good. So now I can take the hub nut. I'm gonna loosely install that. And if you didn't have an impact to tighten down these 4 bolts, what you can do now is the same thing we did to loosen up this hub nut. You can use your pry bar and the socket on the back side and make sure they're all tight. All right, the next step. All these discs, they're gonna come with a protective coating on them. We don't want that all over our pads, so I'm gonna use a little contact cleaner on a rag and wipe that off. And with that cleaned up, I also wanna make sure the end of my brake line is nice and clean, so I'm gonna wipe any dirt away from it. And I'm also gonna wipe down inside. We don't want any dirt in there at all. So with that cleaned up and looking good, I can actually remove this hose altogether. That vent line, we just don't need it anymore. You can take it off like I'm doing, or you can just cut it off. So now you need to choose the right caliper. So if I use this caliper right here, I've got the bleeder down towards the bottom. This would sit on here just like that. You don't want the bleeder at the bottom. You want it at the top. So that means we need this other caliper. So with this one, you go ahead and remove the cardboard. We're gonna set it over that rotor, slide it in place, and you can see the mounting bracket is gonna be in between the rotor and that mount. And then you can take the shorter bolts that come in the kit, put a lock washer on there, and thread those into both mounting locations and tighten them down. We're just using our 13mm combo wrench to tighten those down. Now we're gonna take the banjo bolt, that's the bolt with the hole going through it. We've got the washer with the rubber seal. We'll go through the brake line, and we've got another washer with that seal. We can route this down next to where it goes. And there's a little cap on the caliper, pull that out. So we're getting pretty close there. I'm gonna back it off just a little bit to where I can move this where I need it. Now with this outer mounting bracket loosened up, we were able to get the banjo bolt started on our machine. Some machines you're not gonna have to worry about that, but with ours, or with that being the case on ours, we're also gonna be using the relocation bracket for the inner mount on that brake line. And that way, we can have the brake hose routed so it doesn't bind up when you turn left or right. That's the main thing here. Every machine's gonna be a little bit different, but you always wanna check and make sure when you turn that bar, you don't want it binding up to the side. I can't even turn this all the way. It's gonna pull on the hose. So if it binds up either way or is rubbing on the tie rod, you wanna use that relocation bracket. And if you are using one of these, just use that stock bolt for the bottom mount. And then I've spun the mount for the hose. And then we're gonna use the supplied bolt through that, go through the bracket, and we've got this nylock nut. It's gonna go on the back side. Now before I tighten all that down, I just wanna do one last final check. It's really important to make sure that the hose is not gonna bind up in either direction and that it's clear of your tie rod ends, your shock, all that kind of stuff. So we're looking good. We still have some play all the way out here. It's not pulling on the line too hard, so at this point we can go ahead and tighten down that mounting bracket. And then with that tightened down, I just want to point out we are not reinstalling this outer mount because we need that extra slack in the line so this doesn't bind up. And then from there, just make sure you tighten down the banjo bolt. And with all of that done, we'll go ahead and do those same steps on the other side. Now, one thing I want to point out is if you have aluminum wheels, you're probably going to have to file down that little nub right there on this caliper. So pay attention to that and make sure everything fits correctly. At this point, we need to bleed the brakes, so we're gonna start by removing the reservoir cap. And I've got some rags laid over the ATV, and that's just gonna prevent any brake fluid from spilling on my plastics. Now to bleed this up, I am using a vacuum bleeder. And if you have a bunch of old brake fluid in that reservoir, you can use this to suck it out. And then from here, what we're gonna do is top off the reservoir, and I'm just gonna have a friend help keep this topped off. You wanna make sure it doesn't run dry at any point. Otherwise, you're gonna get air reintroduced into the system. The whole point of this is to get all the air out. So if you don't have a bleeder, what you can do is fill this up. You're gonna have someone hold pressure on the handle, and then you can open the bleeder at each caliper, then close it, let them release that handle, and you can repeat that until you have all the air bubbles worked out of the system. So from here, we've got that anti-splash foam, set that back in place. You wanna make sure the fluid is topped off. If you have this level, you're gonna see a little line at the back of the reservoir. You also have that sight glass in the front. You wanna make sure you're all the way to the top of the sight glass with the cap put on. And be careful to not over tighten these screws. You just wanna snug them down. Wipe up any spilled brake fluid. You can use some soapy water to clean that up as well. That way it prevents any damage to the paint. And then from here we can install the caps on the calipers, and then we're gonna put the wheels on, torque the lug nuts down, and torque down our axle nut, and then we can install the cotter pin. And if the nut doesn't line up with one of the slots when you torque it, you always wanna tighten to that next slot. So that's what it takes to get rid of these old drum brakes and bring your machine into the 21st century and get some real stopping power up front. And again, it's gonna be easier maintenance. So if you need one of these disc brake conversion kits, you can find them on our website. Just click the link in the description below. We offer free shipping on orders over $75, so take advantage of that. And if you wanna see more helpful content like this, subscribe to our channel. I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Thanks for watching.